Good afternoon, everyone. This is Marufa Hafiz, PG second year from Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery. Welcome to my presentation on temporomandibular joint disorders. The contents are introduction, then anatomy of the temporomandibular joint, which is important in order to understand the disorders, then the temporomandibular joint disorders. Temporomandibular joint is the articulation between squamous part of the temporal bone and head of the mandibular condyle. Temporomandibular joint is also referred as gangliomo-orthoidal joint as it is capable of hinge, that is the rotatory movement, as well as gliding, that is the translatory movement. It is also referred as compound joint. In a compound joint, there should be 3 bones, but in temporomandibular joint, there are only 2 bones, but still it is referred as a compound joint because the articular disc, it acts as a non-ossified bone that permits the complex movements of the temporomandibular joint. It is also referred as a craniomandibular joint and a synovial joint. Now coming to the anatomy of the temporomandibular joint. First, we will discuss the cranial component, the mandibular fossa or the glenoid fossa. It is limited anteriorly by the articular eminence and posteriorly by the postglenoid tubercle. The bone at the depth of this fossa is very thin and it forms a partition between the middle cranial fossa and the temporomandibular joint. In the diagram, you can see there is external auditory meatus, and in between external auditory meatus and the temporomandibular joint, there is tympanic plate. Next is mandibular condyle. Mandibular condyle is broad laterally and narrower medially. Its articular surface is covered by a fibrocartilaginous tissue and not with a hyaline cartilage. Next is articular disc. It is composed of dense fibrous connective tissue and its most part is devoid of any blood vessels and nerve supply. In sagittal plane, it can be divided into 3 zones, that is anterior zone, intermediate zone and posterior zone. Intermediate zone is the thinnest, and in a normal joint you should remember that the articular surface of the condyle is located on the intermediate zone of the disc. This articular disc is attached posteriorly to a loose connective tissue that is highly vascular and innervated. This is called as retrodiscal tissue, and superiorly there is a superior retrodiscal lamina and inferiorly there is inferior retrodiscal lamina. You can see it in the diagram, and the central portion of the disc is attached to a venous plexus that gets filled with blood when the condyle moves forward. This articular disc divides the joint into 2 cavities, that is the superior cavity or the superior compartment, which is also referred as temporodiscal compartment, and an inferior compartment which is also referred as condylodiscal compartment. The internal surfaces of these cavities are surrounded by specialized endothelial cells that form synovial lining and produce synovial fluid. That is why it is referred as a synovial joint. Now, coming to the ligaments of the temporomandibular joint, there are 3 functional ligaments and 2 accessory ligaments. The 3 functional ligaments are: first is the collateral ligament. Collateral ligament is also termed as discal ligament. You can see the medial collateral ligament and the lateral collateral ligament. These are responsible for hinge movement of the temporomandibular joint. Next we have the capsular ligament. Capsular ligament invests the joint completely, and it is because of the capsular ligament that the synovial fluid is retained. Next we have the temporomandibular joint ligament that you can see in another diagram, that is also referred as lateral ligament. It is also termed as mean stabilizing ligament or the Chuck ligament. It limits anterior excursion of the jaw as well as prevents posterior dislocation. Next, we have two accessory ligaments, that is the suphenomandibular ligament and the stylomandibular ligament. Suphenomandibular ligament is an important landmark during surgery because internal maxillary artery and the auriculotemporal nerve lies between it and the mandibular neck. Stylomandibular ligament limits excessive protrusive movements of the mandible. Next is peculiarity of the TMJ. It is a bilateral diarthrosis, that is right and left function together. Articular surface is covered by a fibrocartilage rather than a hyaline cartilage. There are some advantages of fibrocartilage over hyaline cartilage. It is less susceptible to the effects of aging. It is less likely to break over time, and it has a better ability to repair. In contrast to other diarthrodial joints, TMJ is last joint to develop. In about 7th week in utero, it develops from two distinct blastema, that is the condylar and the temporal. Next is the functional movements of the temporomandibular joint. The functions of temporomandibular joint are depression, elevation, protrusion, retrusion, and lateral movement. The muscles that are associated with protrusion are lateral pterygoid, assisted by medial pterygoid. For retraction, posterior fibers of temporalis, deep part of masseter, geniohyoid, and digastric. For elevation, we have temporalis, masseter, and medial pterygoid. For depression, digastric, geniohyoid, and mylohyoid muscles. Next is the blood supply and nerve supply. It is mainly supplied by the external carotid artery through its branch, that is the superficial temporal artery. There are other branches also, like deep auricular branch and masseteric branch of the internal maxillary artery. Next is the nerve supply. It is mainly by the branches of the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve and mainly by the auriculotemporal nerve. Now coming to temporomandibular joint disorders. Temporomandibular joint disorders are a class of degenerative musculoskeletal conditions that are associated with morphological and functional deformities. These can be classified as intrinsic disorders, which are directly associated with the joint, and extrinsic disorders. Now, disorders due to the intrinsic factors. In this, we have trauma like dislocation, subluxation, intracapsular and extracapsular fractures, then internal disc displacement with reduction and without reduction, then arthritis like osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. Then we have developmental defects like condylar aplasia, bifid condyle, condylar hypoplasia and hyperplasia, then ankylosis and neoplasm. Now coming to dislocation. In dislocation, there is abnormal excursion of the condylar head beyond the articular eminence. It is different from the fracture dislocation. Here, the intact condylar head gets displaced out of the glenoid fossa, but it still remains within the capsule of the joint. It can be classified into acute dislocation, which is also referred as complete luxation, and chronic recurrent dislocation, that is referred as subluxation. Now, here in this picture, you can appreciate in a normal joint that is shown in figure A, you can see that the condyle, it is within the confines of the glenoid fossa. And in dislocation that is shown in figure B, you can see the condyle has been dislocated out of the fossa. It is in front of the articular eminence. And here is the clinical picture. You can see that the patient is unable to close his mouth. Now, causes of acute dislocation. Dislocation is caused by extrinsic forces or iatrogenic causes. In this comes trauma to the joint, injudicious use of mouth gag during general anesthesia, excessive pressure on the mandible during dental extraction. There are some intrinsic causes or self induced forces like excessive yawning, singing loudly, opening mouth too wide for eating. Now, we should remember that there are some individuals who are predisposed to acute dislocation. And the reasons are occlusal disharmonies, flattened eminence, shallow fossa, systemic diseases like Parkinson's disease, and patients on antipsychotic drugs like risperidone. These antipsychotic drugs have extrapyramidal reactions like dystonia and can lead to dislocation. The syndromes associated are Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and Marfan syndrome. Now, the clinical picture of acute dislocation. The most common clinical picture is inability to close the oral cavity, that is referred as open lock. There will be difficulty in swallowing and mastication, drooling of saliva, deviation of the chin towards the contralateral side. In case of unilateral dislocation, there will be posterior gagging and anterior open bite. In case of bilateral dislocation, and on palpation over the preauricular region, there will be emptiness in the joint space. This is a unilateral acute dislocation of right temporomandibular joint. Figure 1 is the extraoral picture showing inability to close the mouth and the deviation of the mandible towards the contralateral side. And figure 2 is the intraoral picture showing the deviation of the mandible. This is a case of unilateral acute dislocation of temporomandibular joint. Here you can appreciate the preauricular area depression and the laterognathia of the mandible. Diagnosis of acute dislocation can be made based on the clinical history and the examination. We should take a detailed case history and a thorough examination should be done. Then plain and panoramic radiographs can be used, or a three-dimensional computer tomography. This is X-ray showing a bilateral dislocation of the mandible. You can notice how open the patient's mouth is. Now comes the management of acute dislocation. The major problem in reduction of dislocation is to overcome the resistance of severe muscle spasm. So initially attention is given to reduce the tension, anxiety and muscle spasm, and this can be done by reassuring the patient. Tranquilizer or sedative drugs can be used, pressure and massage to the area, and then comes the manipulation. Manipulation can be done without any form of anesthesia, with local anesthesia, or under general anesthesia. So, manipulation under local anesthesia. After administration of LA, we will ask the patient to completely relax. We can inject few drops of LA in the glenoid fossa. We need to stand in front of the patient and grasp the mandible with both the hands. We need to reverse the process of dislocation. We have to place our thumbs on the occlusal surfaces of the mandibular molars and fingertips below the chin. Then we have to exert full body pressure on the thumbs and give a downward pressure on the posterior teeth so as to depress the jaw. At the same time, we have to exert an upward pressure by the fingertips placed below the chin. The downward pressure overcomes the spasm of the muscles, plus it brings the condylar head below the level of the articular eminence. And then a backward pressure is given to push the entire mandible posteriorly. After reduction, we will ask the patient to keep his oral opening restricted. Immobilization can be carried out by giving barrel bandage to the patient for a period of 10 to 14 days. Patient is kept on semi-solid diet. Anti-inflammatory and analgesic drugs are prescribed for a period of 3 to 5 days. Patient is advised to avoid excessive oral opening and support the chin while yawning in future. And we have to remember, if a patient does not respond to the manipulation procedure, then we have to do open reduction. And if patient is not responding to open reduction also, that is in case of long standing cases, then we can go for eminectomy procedures or condylectomy procedures in such cases. Now, coming to chronic recurrent or habitual dislocation, this is similar to acute dislocation, but here there are repeated episodes of dislocation, but the patient is able to manipulate it back into the normal position. So the condyle will move forward and backward over the articular eminence. We should remember that the habitual dislocation, it is not a pathologic condition. There is a variation in the anatomic form of the fossa. There is a triad of ligamentous and capsular flaccidity, eminental erosion, flattening, and trauma. Patient reports a locking sensation whenever mouth is open too wide. Patient is able to return his mouth to the closed position, but often reports a little difficulty. And on clinical examination, if we ask the patient to open his mouth widely, the condyle will suddenly jump forward with a thud sensation. Now, coming to the management part, first is the conservative management or the non-surgical management. First comes the patient education. Patient education is very important. We have to ask the patient to restrict his oral opening, and if patient is not able to do so, we can give intraoral devices. These devices cause myostatic contracture of the elevator muscles, thus limiting opening to the point of subluxation. The conservative method includes use of various sclerosing agents like alcohol, sodium sialate, sodium morovate, platelet-rich plasma can be injected into the joint space. Intramuscular injection of botulinum toxin type A can also be done. This toxin is injected into the lateral pterygoid muscle. This is contraindicated in patients who are suffering from myasthenia gravis, or the patients who are pregnant, lactating mothers, or patients who are allergic to botulinum toxin type A. Intermaxillary fixation or limiting the oral opening by giving elastics. These methods are temporary, so we need to repeat them over a period of time. Second, the surgical management. Surgical procedures to correct the recurrent condylar dislocation are capsule tightening procedures, creation of a mechanical obstacle, direct restraint of the condyle, creation of a new muscle balance, removal of mechanical obstacle. These were given by Miller and Murphy. First is capsule tightening procedures, and in this comes capsulorrhaphy. In capsulorrhaphy, a part of the capsule is removed and then it is sutured back to make it tight. Second is placement of a vertical incision in the capsule, and then we can suture it by overlapping to make it tight. Next is creation of a mechanical obstacle. Lindemann performed an osteotomy on the eminence and turned it down in front of the condylar head to prevent its forward movement. Next is Daugherty procedure. In Daugherty procedure was given by Daugherty. In this, osteotomy on the zygomatic arch is done, and then it is depressed in front of the condyle. So a mechanical obstacle is created and it will restrict the movement of the condyle. Findlay reported the use of L-shaped plates that were anchored on the zygomatic process and projecting it anterior to the condyle. You can see it in the diagram. Next is creation of a new muscle balance. In this comes scarification of temporalis muscle tendon and medial pterygoid myotomy procedure. Next is removal of the mechanical obstacle. In this comes the eminectomy procedure. In eminectomy procedure, the articular eminence is excised so that the condylar head can move forward and backward free of any obstruction. We should remember that it is contraindicated when there is a radiographic evidence of a vascularized eminence because it can lead to intracranial hemorrhage. Thank you.